Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Corain. You can follow all of my content at legendaryupside.com. With me today, Daniel Racz, Dvorchak, Sackreligious. We're going to be talking through the Legendary Upside best ball ranks. Guys, how's it going?
It's good. Man, I was going to try and riff on literally anything about sports, and there's nothing going on. Daniel has been sweating the grimiest NBA second round. How much, Daniel, did you have a lot of Bronny over wherever it opened at? Was it like 48 or 38?
So Bronny's over under opened at 40.5. I got in at 42.5, closed 54.5, juiced over. We'll take that win. Still lost money in the draft. Didn't see the Pistons going with Ron Holland, but we'll make it all back on the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. Odds just came out today. Jeffrey Esper at plus 120, I think is a value. I should be doing some content for Bleacher Report live there next Thursday. So
you're going to be there live?
I go there live with my friends anyway and sweat my pick'ems.
I've never gone.
It's fun. It's a fun one.
It does seem like it'd be fun.
And
yeah.
Daniel, who this French Hornets player, is he any good? Can I be happy about that?
The one that I tweeted would be an all-time remembering dudes player in a decade because no one will know. I know nothing about him. I was at the draft last night doing content. Did not know who he was until he was picked at 6. So
I don't like that. Did not like to hear that, Daniel.
Yeah, he's 3 years younger than me also, which did not feel good to hear.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, Daniel sometimes complains about how not all the players are younger, or how not all the players are older than him anymore.
I was grinding to find a player that was older than me in the draft this year, the NFL draft. There was a BYU punter who went on mission after high school and then still played in college for 5 years. He was still younger than me.
Yeah, well, wait until someone being in the league is a miracle. I'm
close.
That. Yeah. Someone who's not a quarterback anyway. All right, let's talk about the rankings. So I think before we dive into the best ball rankings, we're going to be focused mostly on the underdog rankings today. Trico not able to join us, so we're not going to dive as much into the FFPC rankings. We'll do more of DraftKings stuff in future episodes, but this episode we have to keep it a little tighter, so we're going to do more underdog. The puppy has been having its way with these ADPs. Things are shifting drastically again, and in the exact same way they shifted before, which is that all the receivers are coming up and a lot of the running backs are falling, quarterbacks are falling, tight ends are kind of holding their own, but just the wide receivers just rocketing up the board. How has this kind of changed the way you guys are attacking drafts?
I'm clicking wide receivers a little earlier than I would have otherwise in the tiers of players where they go. So now I take Jaden Reed at the beginning of the 5th round when normally he was an end of the 5th round guy for me. And it doesn't bother me all that much, especially because the earliest puppies I got in, I was getting more normal prices on them. It's just now that you're getting to the tail end of the surge of puppies, all the receivers have moved up. So for me, I'm this is fine. I'm just getting a little bit of diversification here with how these guys fall, what part of the board they land on. So I'm not trying to swim upstream, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the biggest change for me has been kind of like Zach, you said, I'm not now's the time we can start drafting 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds. It's been a little more fading that middle pocket of quarterbacks. I have plenty of Lamar Andrew stacks right now. If it's going to be a little harder to get receivers, this is maybe a good time in the summer to do a lot of late 3 QB stuff. We've talked to ad nauseum how much we like Drake May and Bo Nix. I've tried to plug my nose and get some Bryce Young stacks like Deshaun Watson. I don't like it. It's got a lot of upside though, if you really squint. So I've been taking the foot off the gas a little bit on these detours for early stacks, like the Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid. Still like it, but in this specific draft environment, the puppy specifically, the way receivers are going, probably a good time to do some of these 3 QB, 3 tight end, later type picks. And that's also a really good time of summer to be doing that because we are looking at so many really, in hindsight, there will be really bad picks in the 17th and 18th rounds. We're 17 special team snaps for this guy. Didn't love to see that. Pretty sure we're not getting that from Bo Nix, from Drake May. We're going to miss some games from Drake May, and I still know he's going to play more than so many guys who go in his range. So, and somewhat true on the tight ends, though I do think that's a little more hit or miss. Like, I know for sure Bo Nix almost certainly starting week 1, but have to be really, really, really bad to not make it through the season. Drake May, I know he's starting at some point. Probably not going to rebench him if they're starting him in week 5 or whatever. The tight ends are a little more dicey. I still think we're a pretty safe bet for a like weekly role for Jonnu Smith or for Noah Fant. But if I'm picking one to go late, I've been trying to do a lot more late quarterback right now.
Yeah, and as Kyle alluded to, the late running backs and wide receivers, it's pretty scary. We were having a pre-show conversation about Will Shipley, and there's one reporter from a reporter named Ed Cracks, a great name, and that alone kind of had us in. But the reporter's just, he's outplaying Kenny Gainwell to the point where he might get on the field earlier. It's like a lot of if-X, a lot of conditional statements on path to be a possible backup in an offense where Hurts is still likely the tush-push savant. So these are thin bets, even if they hit, and we're not confident enough in them hitting to want to make those bets in June.
Yeah, this will surprise no one that I took Drake May when I didn't have to, but I had a team that I was finishing out, and this was a big dog where advancing is like, a little more top of mind. You don't need as much, pure ceiling to take down the final and all that. But I took Drake May when I had Mahomes and Derrick Carr already. And I was like, I had him stacked. It wasn't like naked Drake May. I had him double stacked. And I was like, who's giving me points? Who's giving me points in this pick? Drake May is going to add points to my roster. And so to Kyle's point, like if you build to take advantage of these late round quarterbacks in this environment, you're just taking a safer route to points. And there's a lot of late round quarterbacks that are pretty interesting. This late round quarterback environment is much stronger than last year, in my opinion. Like we've talked a little bit about this, but it's not just the job security, which I think is a lot stronger. Like Will Levis, has like pretty good job security, even though he's not one of our favorites. Overall, like Geno Smith has pretty good job security. You could make the case for Howell taking it at the end of the season, but I think he has to play pretty poorly for that to happen. And I don't think that the new regime's necessarily looking to go to Howell. Maybe if the wheels fall off, they will. But those are the kind of the two guys maybe I'm like least excited about as we get into like the 165 plus range, 170s, that type of ADP range. But then you go to like, we got Drake May, Bryce Young, Bo Nix, and Daniel, you just had an article on the site identifying those three guys, not just because they're strong picks, but because they provide correlated ways to help stay ahead of the wide receiver avalanche.
Yeah, I would also, before I
dig yourself out, I guess,
want to add JJ McCarthy to that, and also don't like the Desmond Ridder slander of last year. That was a perfectly fine bet to be making. I would like that on the record. But yeah, so with the wide receivers going so early and the window shrinking, if you do, take Andrews, Lamar, or some other reasonable detour, we'll just call any of those possible detours just reasonable. Like you didn't open 3 running backs because you thought they were values. You made a correlated bet. You thought structurally it made sense, but you need ways to dig yourself out. When you're looking at just making one key input change on your assumptions on an offense with offenses where the quarterback has job security, some breakout potential, we've identified Carolina, New England, and Denver, probably in that order as passing offenses that can exceed expectations, though May, I think, is uniquely capable of producing a big fantasy win, even if none of his wide receivers or tight ends really exceed expectations.
Yeah, and I think the correlated part of it, because sometimes I get like tempted. I'm like, I have a Patriot, but I'm not like probably going to draft May because, maybe I already have 2 quarterbacks, and then comes along a Bronco, and I could tackle on the Broncos, and then here's should I do like Chuba or something and get the Panther too? It's like you do want to probably just make a bet on one, right, and make it a correlate, because that's the idea here. It's like you make one bet on one of these offenses, the offense exceeds expectations, and all of a sudden, the Patriots is my favorite one, not just because of May, because you can get a tight end out of it in Hunter Henry, you can get Antonio Gibson, you get a running back pick. You have multiple ways to play it through wide receiver, including Jalen Polk, one of the best like ADP per draft capital bets. and then you've got Baker, you've got Demario Douglas. But I generally do want to pick one of the team. Like, okay, this is gonna be a Panthers team, and try to just make that bet.
Yeah, obviously we're playing regular season fantasy, not playoff basketball, but I just think using those principles is a nice way to think about it. You take the Dallas Cowboys, you take CeeDee Lamb early in playoff basketball, you're playing for the Cowboys to meaningfully exceed expectations. In that format, it's getting to the Super Bowl and scoring fantasy points. Here, it's just regular season offensive success with ideally a big week in the fantasy playoffs, week 17 specifically. So that's just how I try and mentally frame it.
I definitely fall into that camp where I want to have just really big team stacks. I think that's still a pretty underutilized edge by the field. I think people don't realize how many players you can really have from one NFL team and have it be good, especially if the primary thesis of your bet is this whole team is mispriced.
How many players are you kind of thinking you can, like, how big are your team stacks getting?
I've had a couple that I think are like at the limit, which are 6 total players, including the quarterback. I think really like in the stuff that I had looked at, 5 was where there started to be an inflection point, but 6 did not become bad. You know, it was just that 5 was like the most efficient. But when I think of it, I'm like, if you're telling me I could play 6 roster spots as a bet on this team, and it's slightly less efficient than betting 5, but like when I hit, I'm more likely that of these 6 bets, I've got a lot more that are good. Like, yeah, I'm good with that. You know, I'm good going 5 for 6 on that. You know, those are Hall of Fame numbers.
Now, I assume you're talking about like a team like the Patriots would fit this really well, because the first pick that you would make would be Ramondre, but maybe the first pick that you're making isn't like Jalen Polk until the 12th round. So at that point, it's pretty easy. But like, how much is the price dictating how big these stacks get?
It dictates a decent amount for me. The craziest one that I've done, where I'm like, this is probably right on the line of like what's reasonable and not, is I think I had a 6 Packers bet.
Yeah, that's
so I had Jordan Love, all 3 of the Packers receivers. I think I can't remember which one I didn't have. I either didn't have Jaden Reed or didn't have Christian Watson. One of the 2 most expensive.
Both Daniel and I unmute to see like, oh, you said all 3, but
do you know ball?
one of them, Dontavion Wicks. Just checking.
I think I did have Dontavion Wicks. I just didn't have one of the most expensive pieces, and I didn't have Josh Jacobs. And then I ended up with Marshawn Lloyd and tight end. And yeah, so I had the whole thing there. Another one you can do.
I've done that kind of thing with the Packers. That's a fun one.
And you can do a lot with the Broncos. Podcast. Like once you take Dontavion Wicks enough, you can keep your podcasting license. That's really the proxy this year.
The one caveat I wanted to give about like where I won't, and it's not that I'm saying like, oh, now I'm not okay with taking a big team stack, but it's when I have limited quarterback outs, like my quarterback outs have begun getting depleted. And I'm near the end of the draft and I'm using either Broncos or Patriots or maybe Panthers to open up a quarterback option. I might go, okay, let me take Leggett Polk here on the turn. Then it gets back to me and let me take one of either, Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin. And now I've got 3 quarterback outs opened up again. And I'm good, and I can go back to pushing quarterback and not worry about getting sniped on that. So
yeah, and that's a counter to the idea of making one concentrated bet on one of the offenses. It does give you optionality at quarterback. So there's times where that makes sense, especially if you might end up taking 2 of them. If your first quarterback, came kind of late, you got Matt Stafford or something as your first quarterback, you might want to have 2 of those 3 guys on your team. Yeah, I think the Packers one is pretty nice. You can do the Colts. You can't get quite as big with, but you can get like, and I guess the Colts would bring up another question there. Like, how much are you focusing on the style of quarterback? Because I think like right now you can do Anthony Richardson, A.D. Mitchell, Josh Downs. The tight end's a little harder. You could tack on Jelani. That's maybe more of a DraftKings thing. But you could potentially do that with Jonathan Taylor too. But like Richardson isn't going to carry as many guys along for the ride. So how conscientious are you being about like which types of quarterback architecture.
I would not do a mega team stack like of 5 players or something with Richardson, or even with Hurts, or just because it's guys who I don't even care that much if you're going to rush for a lot of yards. I care a lot if you're going to rush for a lot of touchdowns. That really matters to me. Like, for example, if you told me with Lamar, now the problem with the Ravens is that, like, how many dudes could you even really, like, there's not even that many viable weapons to do it with. So it's hard to get
enough Nelson Aguilar and Isaiah Likely, brother.
I guess not. I mean, like, maybe if you wanted to go crazy with like you got a Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. I mean, that alone makes me want to be like, yeah. Then I'm just like, let me just chill on this. I don't want to. But I guess if you only get Zay Flowers and then you want to do Isaiah Likely and Bateman and Devontae Walker and throw on a Keaton Mitchell because you have a really strong early season running back room of production, I could see it, but I'm still less excited to do that. The rushing quarterbacks just eat into their teammates' production so much. It's not that those guys can't produce still. It's just it becomes a lot harder for that entire team bet to pay off over the course of a whole season. So yeah, I do care about the archetype of the quarterback.
What about Seattle in this? Are you any of you guys doing the Seattle mega stack? Because you can, and it lines up on the right, on that side of the board, the front half of the board. You can get DK, you can get JSN, Lockett. Kind of lines up, I think. I'm less focused on him.
That can happen. But when I'm taking JSN, I'm kind of hoping he assumes a 2 wide receiver set role.
So you're less interested in Lockett.
Yeah, like JSN's hit is contingent on him outplaying Lockett either when they're on the field together or just they're running 2 wide receivers and they're giving it to the young guy and not the one who's going to likely get cut after the end of the year.
And this is where price would come into it. You've made a 3rd round bet and a 7th round bet or a late 6th round bet.
Yeah.
You kind of just want those bets to hit.
And then I'm absolutely prioritizing Geno, like willing to reach enough above ADP because, the team is not dead, but not in an ideal spot if someone else were to take Geno at his ADP. And then, looking to add Charbonnet late if I can, possibly a Noah Fant. But Lockett, I think, might have a bit not enough correlation team level because you take a bet that interferes.
Speaking of stacks, I'm actually in some cases going the opposite of the way Kyle laid it out with going with these 3 late quarterbacks, where I'm finding that right now, if you take AJ Brown in the late 1st, you're very likely to get Jalen Hurts in the early 4th, not the late 3rd. You push him around. You take a receiver there a lot of times. A lot of times that receiver for me is Flowers. And then if I want to do the Lamar thing, I have the Lamar thing too. So, but I've got, AJ Brown, Hurts. I'm getting Josh Allen, Kincaid again. That stopped for a while, but that's happening for me partly because Josh Allen's falling further into the 4th than he was. So if you're in the mid 4th and you have Josh Allen there, I would strongly consider it with the idea of trying to get Kincaid coming back. Andrews Lamar is easier than ever. You're getting them like on the front half of the board, so the back half of the 4th and then the early 5th. And I'm also taking Kyle Pitts when I don't get those guys a decent amount now too, because sometimes James Cook will come back around, so you can do like Allen, Pitts, Cook, and then potentially Keon Coleman in the 7th if you want to do that. Obviously, Curtis Samuel's moving up in price, but you got Khalil Shakir. So there's like if Kincaid doesn't come back, you can still be fine. And then the nice thing with the Hurts one is you already know. It's like I have AJ Brown, so I'm taking Hurts. So it ends up being pretty nice when you get one of those like elite quarterbacks stacked up. It's happening more frequently now than it was. It's making me want to draft 3 straight wide receivers more because that's when I'm most comfortable, right? 3 straight wide receivers, Hurts, 3 straight wide receivers, Allen, Kincaid, 3 straight wide receivers, Andrews, and then you push Lamar around is how I'm playing that because I'd rather end up with just – it's much harder, I think, to backdoor stack Lamar, given the Flowers and Andrews are already off. So yeah, 3 straight wide receivers, Andrew, then Lamar. I mean, those starts are as fun as I can think of. And, Kelsey in the 4th, Mahomes in the 5th. That's the other one that I'm getting these days.
I was just about to say that one because I think I got that like 4 times today in my slow drafts because they were getting to that part of the
It's
draft, and
crazy.
I was doing cartwheels, man.
Yeah. So like, I mean, that start is like very difficult to pass on. But when you have Kyron Williams in the third, and then you go Kelsey, and then Mahomes comes around, and you're like, man, my wide receiver 3 is gonna suck. Like, I'm not gonna feel good. So it's like it is making me. It's definitely rewarding you for kind of following the crowd in the first 3 rounds, and then like the detours, the stack detour that you can take in round 4 and 5 is so good. It's kind of crazy how good it is.
I think I want to get more of the Hurts one too, because at least especially with the Hurts one, you don't have to give up wide receiver firepower. Whereas every other one of the big stacks are tight ends I really like drafting, but you do take a pretty big break if you go Lamar and Andrews, which I still like, or if you go Kelsey and Mahomes, especially like you go Kincaid and Josh Allen. I don't feel great about getting Keon Coleman, putting him in the flex every week. You've taken the bet on Josh Allen, so it is contingent, but like Josh Allen can totally, like, it's probable that he gets there without Keon Coleman. Whereas like the AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts one, you don't have to detour a second time to go specifically tight end, because then you're like, when you go these quarterback tight ends, and especially like if you have to do Keon Coleman after that, you are really you're getting beat up on that flex spot. You're probably not like necessarily winning the flex. Whereas like Hurts is falling and you get to take AJ Brown or Devonta Smith with him. You don't have to expend your like precious early wide receiver draft capital. That's one I should probably try and push even more. I guess the puppies are over. The puppy's over now, but it's probably a good one when these wide receivers get super priced up, is to still be able to get the super power quarterback, but not have to give up and wait so long to get that fourth receiver.
I've been taking just naked Jalen Hurts when he falls to the end of the fourth. A lot of the times it's like
there's a Devontae drafter right around you that
it's right in front of the guy with Devonta Smith, and he hates me every time. But I'm like, that this price isn't a thing that should be allowed to happen, and like, you're gonna give me Jalen Hurts here. And then the way that I look at it is it's now allowing me. I'll do it especially if the elite tight end run has happened earlier, like before me. Because then I'm like, that's fine. I'm not taking one of the elite tight ends in this range, because I now know that I'm taking Dallas Goedert later. And maybe I'm doing like a Brock Bowers, Dallas Goedert kind of thing. And now I've got all my tight end firepower that I need. I just got to do it while you were taking Cortland Sutton and Tyler Lockett, and I was getting good receivers while you were not.
Guess what, buddy? I'm the reason that the tight end run happened, because I saw Jalen Hurts and I took Mark Andrews using Jalen Hurts as cover.
Yes, to get your.
You fell for it, and I got Andrews Lamar.
I mean, I think what we call that is implicit collusion. It benefited both of us there. I do have one more playing this section of the draft take that I'm just gonna say to ruin stuff that I'm trying to do right now. This is very, very foolish of me to say this, but I'm pretty sure. So right now, I don't know about you guys, I get way too little Patrick Mahomes. I think I probably need more Mahomes exposure. I just don't really take him very much unless I'm getting him with Kelsey, because the Mahomes leap of faith of like, surely one of these guys comes back to me is a little scary. Well, if you've been drafting,
because Rice is rocketing up.
And that's the second part of this take is, if you've been drafting in these puppies, you know that Rice is screaming up. And so when you get Mahomes kind of in the middle of the board in the fifth, which does require him to fall in ADP, but it's happening more and more now, I'm willing to do what I'm calling the Mahomes leap of faith, where I just take Mahomes and I'm praying that this room is not one that's going to take Rashee at the 5-6 turn, and they'll just let him come to like pick 65 or something, pick 64, pick 65.
I've done that, like, and it sucks if it doesn't work.
It does really suck if it doesn't work.
I literally just wasted the pick on one because I did that. It didn't work. And then I had, I think, Nico or something, and Stroud was there in the 7th. And I was like, I'm just doing it. I'm just taking Stroud. I'm getting Mahomes, you're just hanging out here. Help me advance. I'm making a different bet for the playoffs. This team, it's busted. The team is done.
So this has happened to me. Zach must have better luck with the leap of faith, because I fall on my face every freaking time. And I'm going to still keep doing it, because I think that's how you build really incredible teams, is you take the leap of faith, you hit the ground hard a lot of times, and then sometimes you get a really filthy Rice Mahomes stack. I'm going to keep trying to do it. what is the out if you are literally just naked Mahomes asking for a friend?
Oh, it's
So
easy. You just mental gymnastics your way into thinking that everyone ping pongs weeks too much, where none of them are optimal. I've already gone through the mental gymnastics and I have it sorted out.
All right. Thank
So
you for
I
not
thought,
pitching
what if-
CEH as the skeleton key.
No, it was Sky
That
Moore.
was my answer. What if so? Jared McKinnon had like 500 receiving yards,
Oh,
like 5
no.
receiving touchdowns 2 years ago. What if CEH
Oh, no.
is that guy?
Oh, no.
Well, what I would say is as a way to like kind of regulate yourself so you don't end up taking this leap of faith too often and blowing up teams that otherwise were perfectly fine. Don't do it if you have a player on your team that could set up a really good quarterback out already that could fall at like a pretty strong value. So like if you have Nico Collins like Pat did there, maybe you don't take the leap of faith because you would love if Stroud comes back to you and all of a sudden you've closed off this out for yourself for something that is far from a sure thing, right? But if you have, say for example, that you ended up with Devonta Smith and the AJ Brown drafter took, or
I didn't close it off at all. I took him. I was like, fuck it, I'm taking.
But like you have Devonta Smith and Hurts goes, and you have who else? Maybe you have Amon-Ra. You have a wide receiver, one of the elites, where the quarterback goes much later, and you're like, I'm cool pushing to a million rounds. I'm cool pushing Goff a million picks, and I'm just gonna take the shot with Mahomes here. And so I'm really not giving up any of these potential elite QB outs. Like, for example, I wouldn't do it with Jamar Chase either because you can get Burrow to fall so far sometimes. So like Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, I'm not really going to do it with. But, those other guys with later quarterbacks, that's where I'll try my leap of faith.
Well, what about this? Okay, let's say I'm in the late-ish fourth, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to pull off the Lamar Andrews. Let's say Lamar is already gone. And so that's done. Kelsey is gone. McBride is there. They could maybe do that. But I'm like, what if I take Mahomes there? And then early to mid fifth, I grab Worthy. And now I'm playing for Rice to come back in the sixth, which he might not. But if he doesn't, at least I got. Now, it's not the beautiful Kelsey Mahomes stack that you can get if you try to push Mahomes to the fifth. But there's not going to be that much, especially in these tournaments that happen, right? And if there's another Time Bucks tournament released right after this, the way these ADPs are lined up now, there's not going to be a ton of like Mahomes, Worthy, Rice in those tournaments. And the way to do that would be to take Mahomes in the late fourth.
Yeah, that doesn't sound terrible to me. The one pushback I'd give on it is that Worthy falls right now for some. I don't know what. I guess it's because the old news blurb is hanging out on his player tag on Underdog, where it's like hurts hamstring in practice, and it's like, oh my god, his hamstring's hurt, and it's like, dude, that happened like 3 weeks ago. Like what? But I think that what you have is you have a lot of more casual drafters that come in, they're not plugged into the news, and they're just clicking the player's card, and they're like, oh, an injury. Oh. And so, because I get Worthy now, like very consistently in the sixth, like pretty consistently.
That's true. Yeah. So maybe that's just not that great of an idea. But it is difficult because you take
that's
Mahomes
what makes the leap of faith
unstacked.
work. It's what makes the leap of faith work, though, is that now you have Worthy and Rice that can go in the mid to late sixth. And I think that's why I'm willing to do it. Now, what you're saying is, if we think through like the trade-off of doing it at the 4-5 turn, what you're missing out on there is you're missing out on the times where I got to squeeze an extra, say like, what am I getting there? I'm getting an elite tight end up on you, basically, is what I'm getting. I took Trey McBride in the fourth, then I take leap of faith, Pat Mahomes, and then I get one of Worthy or Rice in the sixth. And so what you're missing out, then it's your, say, George Kittle or a sliding Kyle Pitts versus my Trey McBride, which I guess at the end of the day, isn't the worst thing in the world. You probably get the worst of it, but it's like, how much did you get the worst of it? Like if we were playing a DFS head-to-head that week and the 1v1 is like Pitts versus, Trey McBride, like how bad is it really for you?
Yeah, I would say I think the time box element matters as well. So for example, I pulled up a draft that this is a mini schnauzer. So, this is over, but I think is reflective of a time that did exist in Best Ball Mania. And in this draft, I grabbed Kelsey 4th, Mahomes 5th, Xavier Worthy 6th, Rashee Rice 7th. There's some of that stuff in BBM. And so I think if you're playing for the Mahomes single stack, leap of faith, maybe one of Worthy comes back or Rice. And then I'm going to probably not get a double stack out of it. I'm a little less inclined to do that in BBM. I think I'd be more interested in trying to do the Hurt stuff, the Allen stuff, the Lamar stuff, which might be what dries up and disappears after this. Whereas right now, it's already a little bit dried up from what it used to be with what's available with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I like that point you made on using time box tournaments. I also want to take a moment to realize that we're just talking about different dog names as if everyone knows their gospel. It's like, yeah, of course, the entire.
I'll be honest, I had not the slightest clue. I think I literally have drafted Schnauzer teams, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so to anyone confused, just another low stakes buy-in tournament. I believe that's the $4, but could be.
I believe it was $4, and this was $3. This was the mini Schnauzer too, and I got a pretty sick Chief stack in it.
Oh, hey, I have some teams in this contest that I've never heard of too, apparently.
But
one of these episodes, we'll just make up different dogs and see if anyone in the audience has
you should see my group chats when we talk about best ball. That's the bit for 30 minutes.
I say that just those tournaments are reflective of what BBM looked like. So trying to eke out a Mahomes single stack in BBM is probably not. I mean, but maybe later in BBM, maybe Mahomes is just regularly falling to the late 5th, and it's just known that you can always basically go Kelsey, Mahomes, and then pick your Chiefs wide receiver in the early 6th. Like that might open up just as like a regular occurrence, So it's not like you can never do it, but I think right now it's not the best time to do it in BBM.
I'd wait for Underdog to draft the Alaskan Malamute to do the Mahomes 5-6 turn.
I literally made that joke to Rotopat this morning. Alaskan Malamute was it too? I will show you the text. I swear to God.
We want to see.
Alaskan.
You're typing Alaskan Malamute into your phone. The podcast is definitely on the rails. All right. I think
at some point we'll pull rankings up.
Yeah, I'm going to do that now. Let's see if I can beat Kyle to Alaskan Malamute.
I need to see Kyle's text. If he did this, I mean...
All right,
we
Kyle,
all need to be in the same psych ward.
Bad news. I switched it to Bichon Frise. I remember Googling. I just Googled dog breeds. And I was like, Alaskan Malamute's a pretty good one. And then I saw the word Bichon Frise. I was like, that's a funnier joke.
Yeah. I'd be all in on the Bichon Frise tournament. That'd be a solid
That's
one.
a 10-cent tournament. That is a small dog.
Okay, so rankings here. LegendaryUpside.com. We can go through anything in the early rounds that's worth touching on. I mean, we discussed on the rankings call that we did right before this that Puka has gotten flipped by AJ Brown, which I don't love. I would prefer to take Puka, and I kind of probably will have a personal stand there. But you guys were of the mind of like they're both studs. Market has decided to take AJ Brown first, and it does unlock that really nice Hurts stack, which I think is why if we're going to follow the market on this, it's to get that stacked Hurts in the 4th, which is probably not going to last. So I think that's enough to say, all right, let's just take AJ Brown here and get access to this kind of limited time offer that the market is providing us. Anything else in the early rounds that jumps out to you guys?
We did the very slight Devon Chan, Malik Neighbors flip flop there. Just we were we were all bemoaning that we weren't at like 40% Devon Chan anymore, so we bumped him up just a skosh.
Just one spot. Neighbors is another big target for us. I'm at 15% Neighbors. I take them a lot, but yeah, Achan, I think a very, very clear target.
We did a few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago now, like we're really low on Jonathan Taylor. Can I conceive of a world in which he beats us? Yeah, he was really freaking good 2 years ago and can get all the touches and has a running quarterback who could open up rushing lanes. How do we feel about that argument with Derrick Henry? I don't see this guy's name when I'm drafting because I want to be going receiver early. I don't want to be taking aging running backs in this range. I think you guys probably get him a little more than I do, but man, he's one where, yeah, I can think of a world in which Derrick Henry scores a lot of touchdowns and rushes for a lot of yards. I can imagine that. And do you guys get much of any of him? 'Cause I don't, and I'm afraid.
You just made a really good point, but it went against what I was doing previously, so I'm gonna need to reconsider. But yeah,
it goes against what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
No, go ahead.
I have 0.5% Derrick Henry right now. If I listen to the sidekick, I'd probably have like 2%, maybe 3%. But the times when I'm getting recommended Derrick Henry is when I'm like dead in the middle of an avalanche. And it's like, wow, all the receivers suck here. Derrick Henry is actually pretty good value. I'm like, that's bait. That's bait. And so it's just the opportunities that I get presented Derrick Henry when he would be reasonable to take there. It's just like, yeah, but if I do that, I'm going to hate the rest of this draft. So yeah, no, I'm with you where like, I probably would like to have maybe more like 2 or 3% Derrick Henry. I probably will when the wide receiver price, what I think is actually going to happen. We all talk about how like these running backs are going to move up like crazy at the end of the summer. And what I actually think is going to happen is they'll move up, but what's really going to happen is like, you're going to end up with just enough wide receivers that get jumped by them. So it won't actually feel as bad to take a Derrick Henry. You're like, I can't actually take Derrick Henry because when it comes back to me in the 5th round now, I'm not going to be staring down like Lad McConkey. You know, I'm like, I actually have a wide receiver who I feel better. Maybe I have Keenan Allen back available to me there in the middle or into the 5th. And I'm like, this is okay. I can do this now. I can make Derrick Henry work. But now it's like, it just gets really bleak if you take Derrick Henry. And I checked, I have like a little under 3% Jonathan Taylor. I click him less than he's suggested to me right now. Again, just because I think we've all been talking about this. Maybe it was before we started recording, but taking 3 straight wide receivers just really helps a lot in being you're more flexible with what it allows you to do. It's just saving your budget rather than blowing it early. And the more flexibility you have as you progress through a draft, the more you're able to capitalize on your room making mistakes. And your room might make a small mistake early where it's like, oh my gosh, Jonathan Taylor fell to 19th overall. That's 3 spots after where we have him ranked. It's like, cool. Like you got 3 spots of value on Jonathan Taylor, but like, how are you going to feel when Isaiah Pacheco is sitting there like 12 spots past ADP? How's that feel? Like, you know, or like, how do you feel when Kenneth Walker's there 16 spots past ADP and you're just like, I really can't take Kenneth Walker here because if I pass on Jameson Williams, then I'm totally dead at wide receiver. And it's like, you don't want to have that conversation with yourself. That's not the way that you want to draft and have a good time, you know? So that's kind of the way that I look at it. Just preserve that flexibility to capitalize on your room making mistakes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I am taking less Taylor now than I was, but I'm still at 8% Taylor. I'm at 1% Henry. So I clearly think they're pretty different bets, even though Henry is cheaper. He's around cheaper, but they're basically like bounce back efficiency bets. Henry hasn't been all that efficient as a rusher in a few years. He's been fine. He had in 2018, he had 236 rush yards over expected, which was second to Saquon Barkley. In 2019, he led the NFL with 326. Then he led the NFL again in 2020 with 367. Both those are really, really high marks in NFL Next Gen rush yards over expected. But then in 2022, dropped to 87, then to 83 in 2020, or 84 in 2023. He was behind James Conner, Zach Moss, Raheem Mostert. So this is all from an article I had up on the site, but I point out, like, if you're looking for a touchdown-driven profile, those guys give you the same thing for like a lot cheaper. He turns 31 in January. So if you're betting on him to like recapture the previous form, like that's dangerous. It's a dangerous bet to make. I think it's much more likely that you're betting on him to be Raheem Mostert, to be James Conner, a totally solid, clear-cut starter in a good offense, and he scores a ton of touchdowns. That can definitely happen, but it's like a pretty big price tag where I don't think you have all that realistic of a path. I know it's Derrick Henry, and I would love if he just like became 2018 Derrick Henry again. That would be a lot of fun, but like I don't think that's very likely. Jonathan Taylor, who's still very young, recapturing a form from a couple years ago, is somewhat likely. Like it's a realistic way to play this. So that's where I'm just like, I'm kind of betting. It's a similar profile on one level, but like oh my God, he just ripped off a second 40-yard touchdown. That's JT. That's a much, much more likely to be JT than Derrick Henry at this point in their careers. That's where I'm at on it. So I recognize that Henry could bury me. I also recognize I've mostly been betting against Henry his entire career, and he's buried me and come close to completely burying me in that one year where he like had like 23 PPR points a game and then got hurt halfway through. that was shaping up as a pretty bad year. But so I could see him definitely making this look like a bad take, but you're betting on him to be like such an outlier. You're betting on an outlier touchdown season, full stop, and then you're betting on him, I think, to be a true outlier from an age level performance, from his like breakaway ability and all of that.
I've got an idea around how I'm thinking through playing Derrick Henry, because when I lose to Derrick Henry, and the vast majority of my entries are in like these massive field tournaments, right? So when I lose to Derrick Henry, it's because he's having this crazy outlier season where it's just like you're dead if you don't have Derrick Henry, right? He's doing like a Christian McCaffrey level thing, but you got him here in the late third, early fourth. And like it could happen, but like on the back of 1 billion touchdowns, right, is what you're looking at. And so if that happens and I've got him in a small field tournament, like say I take him in a high stakes thing where I'm looking at like there's only a dozen, Derrick Henry teams in the whole tournament, like that seems like the way that I want to play it, because then I just have to be like, because when you get those legendary running back seasons that are like, this is the guy that defines the season, no CMC, no money, or no Henry, no money, then it's like, why don't I just do that in the small field stuff where like, if I have a bunch of Derrick Henry and BBM, I think 99% of the time that he has a legendary season, I still lose a bunch of money, right? Like I needed to also get the nuts around it. So like, let me do it in a small field thing where it's like, I'm going to put a few $1,000s of entries on Derrick Henry, but they're going to be across a couple teams. And then when he hits and all my lotto teams are dusted, that's fine, because I'm shipping 100K in the Mastiff, or I'm shipping a milli in the DK 555, because also the people who drafted Derrick Henry in the DK milli 555 took 4 quarterbacks through the first 7 rounds, and like their wide receiver 1 was Jamison Williams, and so it's like that's the path where I don't regret the way that I played Derrick Henry, is playing him appropriately given the contests that I'm in. And so that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to, in DK especially, I want to, when I'm in the part of the board where Derrick Henry lands a lot of the time, I'm going to be really extra cognizant of like, let me set my ass up for wide receiver early here, because I'm about to do something that's going to feel real yucky, but it is for the good of my portfolio. Derrick Henry, all right, here you go. And because the thing is, as a guy with a Derrick Henry profile pick as his Discord pick, I want to root for the big dog, okay? Like, if you hate rooting for the big dog on Sundays and you're not texting tractor emojis to your friends as he just fucking truck sticks a guy he weighs 80 pounds more than, you're just not a red-blooded American. So you need to have the ability to root for some Derrick Henry if you want joy in your life. And that's the way that I want to play it.
No, Sack, initially I was going to push back as your two things being incompatible, not wanting to take Derrick Henry in fantasy, but also rooting for him. But you had me at red-blooded American. It's like rock flag.
You had us all there.
It's like rock flag and eagle, and it's always sunny. You say the buzzwords, and I am in. No questions asked. I threw out all the logic.
I actually think it's logical. I think it makes sense. Like you're playing it in these small field tournaments where, like, if he's the dude, you've got to share the dude. You got a much higher chance of him coming through, as opposed to like when in Best Ball Mania. Like, I do not want to build a hedge part of my portfolio around Derrick Henry. I'm just going to make the stand. I'm just going to make the stand that he's not the guy, because you're going to have to find the guys, right? To win Best Ball Mania, you're going to have to find the guys who are the guys, and then are the guys in week 17 as well. And I only have 150 of those teams. Like, I want to make I'm not going to cover every possible combination. I'm just not. So I want to try as hard as I possibly can to land on the combinations of players and create the teams that I think can actually do that. So yeah. Now, unfortunately, Sack, I have really bad news about the Massives payout structure. It is 20K to first, not 100K. So you're going to have to win a bunch of places. It's $1,000 to get in, but the big dog is, I think, what you're looking for there. 200.
It'll be the big dog instead then. Yeah, and fitting for Derrick Henry. That
the big dog, yeah. Big dog. The big dog and the big dog. I like it.
You're ignoring the Alaskan Malamute. So once Underdog listens to this pod and adds that,
what is your structure that you're looking for in the Alaskan Malamute?
Let's go $750 buy-in, all the money to first, every dog.
Wow,
I like that.
I feel like that's how the Alaskan Malamute would want it. I'm no dog expert though. That might be Kyle's.
I gotta Google this dog. That's a 100% the first.
While we're throwing out large dogs,
dog, right?
Yeah, it's a husky type looking dog. Yeah.
While we're throwing out large dogs, let's get a Great Pyrenees tournament in there. That one's probably like a $2,000 entry.
That's more big. That's a big dog.
That's what I've said. $2,000. That'd be Underdog's largest entry fee, right?
DK has the like 10K entry one, 140 total or teams drafted. It's like literally, I think 10K. That's a mountain dog right there.
All I'm saying is I'm going to be consistently poaching, like just perusing that lobby and seeing who's sitting it. And I may send out the bum hunter signal to the group to see if we can all pitch in $2,500 to.
Now the Bichon Frise, what are we looking for there structure wise? So it's a little teacup dog.
It's a double up. It's a double up.
It's a double up.
It's a $1 double up.
Yeah, I was gonna say it can't. Like, I think it should not have a value in the dollar column. I think it's cents. It's a very petite little dog. So maybe it's a 50 cent. 151 max. The largest ability to max a tournament ever. 151.
And let's make it rig free while we're at it.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. All right. So we've launched a couple new tournaments. Moving down into this group of wide receiver, I'm curious. I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the sixth round, kind of the post Worthy, who's, I guess he's kind of going into the sixth, right? You got a Dunze. I think we're generally scooping a Dunze once he's there. In the early sixth. Chris Godwin has jumped up a lot. We're not as into him, but if you're in the mid to late sixth, that's where we have him ranked there. Right on the 5-6 turn, we're more into a Dunze Worthy. Just, I think, a much higher upside way to play it. But DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Rashee Rice, Ladd McConkey, Jordan Addison, a lot of these guys are moving up. Rice moving up a lot. Like you used to be able to get him 10 picks past this. You could get him in the 80s, no problem. I think he's going to move into where we have him ranked pretty quickly. I think he's going to be mid 60s. He's a guy that we're probably going to be staying ahead on through the sixth. But I guess just thoughts on this general pocket, how you're playing it, and then maybe we can get a little bit into the Rashee Rice part specifically.
So on Godwin specifically, we were decently ahead initially, just thinking the spread between him and Evans was too overpriced. We had reservations about the Tampa offense, but either of these players is capable of leading the team points. Evans more likely than Godwin, goes without saying. But now it seems that the market has a consensus that just the Tampa offense is one that they're not worried about significant regression, despite the loss of Dave Canales, despite an aging offensive line. I think there are worries in Tampa. Godwin and Evans aren't getting younger. I think this is an offense ideally I'd like to be underweight on.
Yeah, I don't really get why Godwin has moved up like ahead of other receivers. Maybe some of these rookies people are kind of cooling on. The rookie fever has definitely died down a little bit. But it is, I don't know. I find it a little surprising that there was some reports that he was playing out of the slot more again. And so maybe he will be a little bit more emphasized in this offense than he was with Canales actually. But McMillan has gotten a lot of love out of camp. And so like, is it as concentrated as it was last year if McMillan's involved? Not that he's like a huge threat, but it has surprised me that he's moved up like this.
The other one I'd talk about here is Calvin Ridley. I believe that when we were doing our rankings call right before this show, my precise words on what we should do with Calvin Ridley's ranks were actually I can't share.
Maybe
the
don't
precise
repeat
words.
the precise.
Yeah,
we discussed where to put him, and you suggested the center of the earth.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
So like I personally, like when I'm drafting with the sidekick and it recommends Calvin Ridley to me over DeAndre Hopkins, I will just wave it and
I just take Hopkins. Yeah.
I'll take the better player.
I just take Hopkins.
If you want to be more diversified, or you think that DeAndre Hopkins maybe isn't as good as we think he is, or Calvin Ridley's better than we think he is, I think you got to think both those things. I think you got to think of pretty strongly to take Calvin Ridley over DeAndre Hopkins. But anyway, we're trying to respect the market a little bit. I will just say, like, LOL, like this is the example of like why the market's bad and why there's edge in the game. Because like if the market thinks Calvin Ridley's more than 10 spots better than DeAndre Hopkins, like the games are still good. They're alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have been way behind on Ridley the entire time, and he's just stayed there. So, there's a limited amount of influence here.
Yeah.
We are still it's a big market. Unfortunately, we still can not all the time, but this is one where we've just been able to get as much Hopkins and as little Ridley and scoop other guys in the fifth.
Yeah. Pre-free agency, we thought there was enough of a chance for Ridley to leave Jacksonville, and the teams that would sign him, likely New England, just would be downgrades. And we said the market's not pricing this in. If he stays in Jacksonville, we don't think his ADP will react, then we'll move. And if he goes elsewhere, the market will surely come down because he goes to a worse landing spot, right? And it's like the Star Wars meme with Natalie Portman, and the market's just like staring you back in the face, not moving. It's like, no, Tennessee, this is neutral. And I do not think the Tennessee Titans landing spot was neutral. I'm not as confident as Sack in the Hopkins versus Ridley, but he will just LOL at me for that. And I had to fight long and hard to not have Ridley be moved to, as he said, the center of the earth. And I'm like, more the magma, the molten layers.
Yeah, beneath the crust, but not down to the center. Yeah, we do compromise on the rankings calls. So Kenneth Walker's been kind of a victim of this, where now we have him at 70, and he's got an ADP of 67.5. But in drafts right now, I'm seeing Walker like fairly regularly in the early 7th round, and so I think like we have it ranked like this. I think the ranking makes sense if you have, if you're well positioned at receiver. Kenneth Walker's pretty nice in the late 6th. But if you're not, I think taking one of these receivers that we have behind him makes a lot of sense, because they could all get snapped up. And even if Kenneth Walker doesn't make it back, David Montgomery will probably be there. Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, Jalen Warren. And we hit this giant pocket of running backs where, you see here, like we don't have a receiver other than Jameson Williams. Cortland Sutton is down at 93 in the rankings. So from 77 to 93, it's just Jameson Williams and Cortland Sutton, and then another fairly big gap down to Tyler Lockett at 100.
Yeah, the goal I think of this part of the ranks is to really point. You should try and get 4 receivers at least before. It's Keon Coleman who we have at the bottom of the tier correctly, and then after that, it's the wasteland. It's like the scenes from Mad Max and Furiosa. This is not an area where you want to be searching for wide receivers. And while we think Walker is the best of those running back picks, there are so many great options after that you should be set at wide receiver before you're considering him, or correlation with Seattle.
Yeah, so when you're saying you want 4 wide receivers before this pocket, or getting your 4th wide receiver in this pocket?
In this pocket, like the minimum in a
I
typical
think
draft.
you want
again,
5. I think you want 5 here if you can. Now,
including this pocket, you mean? Like,
yeah,
this is where you get number
I
5.
think
I am
4
most comfortable
would-
when I have 5. When my wide receiver 5 comes from this pocket.
I'm
That's what
decently comfortable at 5. I'm not too worried about 4 because I think there are different levers you can pull during drafts. Dontavion Wake solo or any correlated bets. A lot of ways to play it.
That's true. And like I mentioned, Anthony Richardson, he's not an overstack candidate, but like if you have Anthony Richardson unstacked to this point, and you can come down and get AD Mitchell, you reach 107, you reach like 10 spots ahead of ADP. Like I'm very comfortable doing that when I have Richardson. Josh Downs, that's one way to play it. I do like the Dontavian Wicks one because it's not just him. You can get Dobbs. You can Watson's usually you have to take Watson ahead of Love, but you already have Musgrave.
The Packers are another option to backstack. You have to be willing to take Love first and then fill it out. But of the like cheap late stacks, the Packers are the most expensive, but they're definitely viable in the strategy.
Yeah. So that's true. Now the other one is the Patriots, which you wrote up in your article as being a good one. But I mean the Jalen Polk, like he's pretty damn cheap. So getting him, and we're pretty aggressive on Polk, but he has the opportunity, I think, to be the wide receiver 1 with a like emerging quarterback who's really fantasy friendly. Like that's a guy I think it makes sense to target, especially at wide receiver 62. But I mean, it is tough when I'm definitely open. And I think it's totally fine to be grabbing your wide receiver 5 with like an AD Mitchell, Josh Palmer, Shakir, Dobbs, Shaheed, Samuel, right? All these dudes. That's fine. But I'm just saying, I feel the most comfortable when I actually have 5 through the first 7. That's what I'm trying to detour less.
If I'm at 4, I'm really trying to start wide receiver times 3 at the beginning, then maybe in a Dunze or one of the early rookies in that tier.
I like that.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
CD Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Steph Diggs. That's such a strong wide receiver commit that those 4, in terms of draft capital commitment, are much more than a typical base 4 of like if Terry McLaurin was your wide receiver 2 or even your wide receiver 3. So it depends who your 4 are.
That's a very good point. Yeah. And there's some really, really, really fun 4 wide receiver through 7 builds that this environment offers. So I'm not saying 5 no matter what. It's just that's generally my preference.
What I'm hearing is it's just start 3 wide receivers in a row, and the rest of your life will be so much easier.
Well, so I've been trying to figure out a way, and we only have about 6 minutes left in this pod before I have to run. So we're not going to have time for me to fully flesh out this idea. But I've been trying to come up with kind of like, what is the key? What is the key to this landscape? And the easiest thing is to go 3 straight wide receivers, and then you have so much flexibility. And right now, at this current moment, the key might be 3 straight wide receivers and one of those stacks that we talked about. That's just like so clean. But if you were going to say you're not going to get one of the stacks, then I would say what I think might be a potential key is you're able to get a legendary season out of McCaffrey, Robinson, Reese, Gibbs, Achane, and no one else structured their teams correctly so that these guys are actually it turns out that in this environment, hitting on Breece Hall wasn't enough because so many Breece Hall teams were underpowered, like severely underpowered at wide receiver, and that a well-structured Breece Hall team or Bijan Robinson team is underrepresented in the final. Because it's just
this is something Hayden has kind of pointed out in a different way when he's showing data to profile drafters. I bet you the average Jonathan Taylor in his own right, we have as
Jonathan Taylor
completely
one,
neutral
yeah.
at ADP, completely neutral. He's a perfectly fine pick there. But I'm guessing the average Taylor drafter is not drafting nearly the same as the average Drake London drafter, the average Chris Olave drafter. Someone who's prioritizing wide receiver there is going to play it differently than the person who thinks like, I got to get me some Jonathan Taylor. So if you can be the thing Hayden was like using the data shows, like, you know who drafts Jalen Warren? It's us type of people. He can tell that if you draft Warren,
and people who read Kareem.
He knows them. So
Yeah.
if you can break that mold by getting Taylor, right, but then still drafting, in in the trying to play the wide receiver landscape correctly, but with one, Jonathan Taylor legendary season, you put it perfectly. You can probably build a plus EV Taylor team that is specifically valuable because it's underrepresented in the style of Taylor team it is. Not that you had some strong conviction, I want to get 20% Taylor. I'll have probably, I'm for sure going to have not a ton of Taylor, but the teams I want to have, I want them to be underrepresented, the types of teams that you can build a monster with, that I don't think the average Taylor drafter is probably gearing towards.
Taylor's probably the best example of this because he's like the most. Saquon's honestly probably the very best example because we're not drafting him. But,
big dog.
Yeah. So I mean, if you go Taylor, it's definitely he's more likely to be paired with other running backs. Like I think your Jonathan Taylor drafter is more likely to be pairing him with Bijan or Breece than the type of receiver who's skipping Jonathan Taylor. So, or maybe he's pairing with Kyron, or maybe, the Jonathan Taylor drafters grabbing, ETN and then Jacobs, right? They're taking more than one running back early is my point. I do think that grabbing one of these running backs early and then probably grabbing 5 receivers as within your next 6 picks after that, before that break hits. And then, this is, I think, the other key, probably grabbing an elite tight end, and then consider stopping at 4 running backs total. Right? You go hyper fragile with one of these elite running backs because you get to this pocket of the draft: Ramondre, Aaron Jones, Jalen Warren, Samir White, Najee Harris, Jonathan Brooks, Alvin Kamara, Zach Moss, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, right? You got upside bets here now coming in, and Trey Benson, Tyjae Spears. These are like a little bit more kind of classic later running back bets, but like Singletary, it's just the starting running back for the Giants with no real competition other than, a converted wide receiver who might just be a kick returner. You could pretty easily go Bijan Robinson, Zamir White, Zach Moss, and Javonte Williams and be done. You're done. So that's why I'm trying to and then you get the elite tight end and you still have enough for the wide receiver firepower. I was trying to do this with 0 running back, and it gets a little tricky with having enough picks for your next wide receiver picks. You kind of want to, you don't want to just stop taking receivers and have 5 wide receivers through like 13 rounds. And I mean, you can do that, but it's actually, I think this build is a little easier when you do grab a running back in the first or the second or even the third if they can, and then it allows you to more easily stop, because you only need at that point probably 2 running backs in that pocket. You get 3, like, you're definitely good. And you're lined up with the pockets of the draft like you are when you go 0 running back, but you're potentially doing something that's just harder to do. Like advancing, and maybe this changes when ADPs change, but right now it does strike me that like advancing McCaffrey, Bijan, and Breece is going to be hard. Like unless they go nuts, like they need to go absolutely nuts, or it's going to be kind of hard.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are other ways to play Brees as well. Like offensive player of the year, 22-1. I bet that a few days ago. Highly recommend anyone that wants to bet on the Brees legendary season and doesn't want to have to chase an avalanche consistently. So Brees, when you take him, just assume he crushes and hit wide receiver hard, hit it heavy, and maybe dip your toes back into the running backs in the Shrek range, as Sack euphemistically put it an episode prior.
I was trying to find a team that I have going right now. It's one of my few Saquon teams, but I think I got him at like pick 28 or 29. I stopped at 4 running backs. I had a couple others that I took earlier than usual. And I also ended up with Mahomes and Kelsey and Rashee Rice on the team. And so if this happens to be the year where you do need Saquon, I will gladly see all the other Saquon teams in the finals, because that's what I'm trying to do. Like, let me have the team where it's like no other Saquon team is building like this. Like, I want to show up. And if it happens to be that thing, I've got a couple break glass in case of Saquon emergency teams, but they're sick. They're really good.
Yeah, you know what? I want to do that with like Pacheco. I want to do it with ETN, with Henry, with these guys. Like, you get a Henry share in the 4th and you build it like that. That's because the pricing is weird. The pricing is not, what it used to be. Like a guy like Pacheco 4 years ago probably goes in the middle of the 2nd round.
Yeah, that's a 2nd round pick.
2nd round pick. So you get him in the 5th. It's like, all right, I got this extra 2nd round pick from 4 years ago, and I'm going to build it like that. I think that's how we get these guys. It's a little bit different with Pacheco because he actually potentially is very discounted from the potential production you're getting. But I still think like you're not going like 0 running back in the same sense that we're used to. If you get Joe Mixon in the 6th, like it's not like getting, the 6th round running backs that we used to get. And so kind of building it like that. But I think I've been talking about this on basically every podcast I've been on. But I think the thing that's crystallized for me is that I think this could be a way to unlock not having to go 3 straight wide receivers. Because the easiest thing by far, and it's just almost never regret having gone 3 straight wide receivers. You maybe could look back and be like, I wish it would have been nice to have a little more H-Chan or get that Kyron share or whatever. But like for the rest of that draft, you're not going to feel uncomfortable having gone 3 straight wide receivers. It's going to allow you to do a lot of other fun stuff. How do we beat that start? I think it's like probably hero running back and then aggressively attack wide receiver and maybe add on that elite tight end. And then free up some roster spots by being like, I did it at running back. I got 3 to 4 incredibly priced profiles at running back, and I'm good there. I don't need any more.
Yeah, a couple early in, like, right after the draft, I ended up with a lot more teams being 4 running back, and just kind of like coming to the realization, like you're saying, like, why do I need an extra? I have Breece Hall, and then I took Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, and one like high upside rookie.
Yeah,
I think I'm good. Like, why do I take another running back here? Like, that would have been where I'd
or even
stop.
like a guy like Ty Chandler. Like, you can get
exactly, yeah,
like 3 really strong running back profiles. You don't even need to grab like you can grab Jaden Daniels instead of a Brian Robinson, and then you grab a Ty Chandler. You can grab a Vidal or some one of these scratch off kind of profiles. And you're like, if this dude hits, I'm in incredible shape. And if not, like maybe he only contributes a week or 2 here or there, and that's enough. I think you can go to 5 with this as well, but it creates a luxury pick sort of situation. But I think like there's been times where you take a hero running back and you can, you don't take your next running back until like round 9, and like you'd be like, oh, maybe I could even take 6. I don't think you want to be doing that, right? Like I think hero running back, we're stopping at 5 and we're considering stopping at 4 is where I'm just trying to think through like how do we take advantage of this landscape, and that's just the thing that I keep coming back to.
I just want you to stop talking about that strategy for a little while so I can maybe execute it before other people.
I'm going to write it up because I'm getting close. I'm getting close to where I can actually write it up. Because I was like, is this a 0 running back strategy? But executing it with 0 running back is actually kind of difficult if you're trying to get your stacks situated, because you have so much wide receiver capital, and you're actually like when you go pure 0 running back, you can sometimes you lose a little flexibility because you're committed to the wide receiver position. You don't want to be taking a ton more wide receivers. And then if you get boxed out of your quarterback stacks, all of a sudden you're like, what do I do with this team? Whereas if you take that running back early and then you attack wide receiver 5 through round 7, you still have like, you didn't spend your first round pick or your second round pick on a receiver. So you still have like a little more capital to play with, and backdoor stack something is a little bit more appealing. And you just don't need as much at running back now. So you take 2 running backs in that pocket, or even 1, and push it and grab like a Zeke Rico double up.
Yeah.
And you're like, my RB3 is called Cowboys. Like I'll be okay. You can do that. Like, so anyway, you asked me to talk less about it, and I'm talking more about it.
But Zeke Rico double comment. I feel like that's like in the Oscars when they blast the music to play people off. You can't be mentioning
Actually, and we do need to go. So Daniel played me off there. Anything to note before we get out of here?
Yeah, I had the article up on LegUp about ways to counter the wide receiver avalanche. I think about half of it's free. It's a fun read there. I think some of the analysis after is also good when I veer away from some of the pop culture references. We'll be doing some hot dog eating contest content with Bleacher Report next week, so look out for that on socials as well.
I've got an article that I think we're releasing soon here in the next day or two. That's kind of just a like big picture overview of like kind of a back to basics fundamentals for drafting. Would be really good if this is your first show you're joining us for, you're just starting to roll up your sleeves, get back into best ball summer, and you want a refresher. It's a good article. And then, I think I do enough in there to like touch on some important concepts that it'll be a good refresher for everyone. And then I've also got a really fun, more technical article that I'm almost done with, looking at some of the math behind week 16 and week 17, the levers of correlation there, and how game stacking versus team stacking and the prize structures all kind of shake out there. He had some pretty cool methodology with some help from Shady Advice there that I'm excited to share that one. We'll probably have that sometime next week.
We are doing team previews at Roto World. Check out the Roto World podcast. Karane's been on it before, and as far as I know, it's the only other show he does in the space. Legendary Upside in that one. So if you listen to like 2 straight months of it, you'll find him again because you're on it like a few times a year at least. So just listen to a lot of them in a row, and you'll find Karane's other work there.
But you'll also get Pat, Denny, and Kyle, which is delightful on its own. Sackreligious article, I think by the time you're listening to this, it will be live. So go check that out on Legendary Upside. And I'm going to be working on follow-up to the running back article that I had a couple weeks ago. I'm also going to be writing an article about the strategy. That's why I'm trying to talk it out, because I got to figure out what it even is. But I think I've got there. There's some data that actually backs this up as potentially a pretty interesting path. So we'll I don't know. Maybe I'll see if Shady Advice can sim this for me. So can we sim if this is smart? But anyway, I'm going to write this up as a potential way to attack the landscape. So look for that in maybe a week or 2. But we'll be back here. We'll be doing another rankings podcast in the next week or 2 as well. So look for that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you guys later.